Hello, I'm really glad you're here. On this channel, I share simple, quiet stories about life, love, and the little feelings we all go through. If that sounds like something you enjoy, don't forget to subscribe. Every subscriber gives me a little more encouragement to keep telling these stories. Now, let's begin today's story. The wind slipped through the cracked window of the Greyhound bus as it rolled slowly into a small town in northern Maine. The sky was a solid grey, as if someone had mixed lead into the air. The snow didn't fall in flakes, but in thick, heavy sheets that blanketed everything. The trees, the road, the slanted roof wooden houses, as if the town itself had been wrapped for burial. Samira sat by the window, her head resting against the frozen glass. Her breath fogged the pain for a second before disappearing. She drew her coat tighter, a worn, second-hand brown one with frayed edges. Not because she was cold, but because there was nothing left to open up to. No words, no expression, no plan beyond simple survival. She had been on the road for 28 hours, from a refugee intake center outside Syracuse, through 3 transfers, 2 checkpoints, and 1 sleepless night stretched across a plastic chair, afraid to close her eyes too long in case someone took her bag. Inside that bag were all she had left in the world: a photo of her daughter, a creased handwritten letter, and a small plastic pouch of cold medicine. No cash, no phone. The bus slowed, skidding slightly over the snow-packed road. The driver, a middle-aged black man with a deep, calm, almost detached voice, tilted his head toward the rearview mirror.
Maine. Last stop. Time to get off, ma'am.
Samira nodded. She didn't say thank you. Not out of rudeness, but because her throat had frozen long ago. She pulled her grey fabric suitcase, its handle half torn, and made her way down the narrow aisle. The wind slapped her face like a handful of ice. She blinked hard, but could barely make out the wooden sign ahead. Addison County Transit. The station was nothing more than a small glass shelter with a flickering light. Across the street, a convenience store sat dark and shuttered, its sign creaking in the wind. No cars, no horns, no people. Just a black SUV idling by the curb, engine humming softly. The car door opened. A woman in her 50s with brown hair tied low stepped out. She wore a coat with the logo Hope Path Refugee Program. Her face was a mix of kindness and exhaustion, the look of someone who had welcomed too many strangers to remember each name.
Samira, I'm Linda. We spoke through the organization in New York.
Samira nodded, gripping her bag strap tight. Linda smiled and walked closer.
Cold, isn't it? Come on, let's get you in the car. I'll take you to your place first. We'll talk about the rest tomorrow.
For the first few minutes in the car, neither spoke. The road passed in silence. Rows of dark wooden houses, streetlights throwing thin gold over the snow. Samira stared out the window without blinking. She saw sloped roads, wooden fences, a small post office. Everything looked unnaturally clean, as if the snow had swallowed every sound, every trace of human life.
You made it all the way here. That's no small thing. Not everyone lasts long enough to reach Maine.
Samira tilted her head slightly, listening but said nothing.
Do you speak English?
A little, enough.
Good. The local fire station needs help with cooking and cleaning. It's hourly pay, not much, but steady. For now, you'll stay in a cabin near the woods. Once your paperwork clears, we'll find a more permanent place.
Once your paperwork clears. The words lingered in Samira's mind the rest of the drive. 3 simple words that carried an entire life within them, because if it didn't clear, going back would mean death. The car stopped before a small wooden cabin buried in pine trees. 1 floor, slanted roof, steps covered in snow and moss. Linda got out first, unlocking the door with a key. The light flickered twice before coming fully on. 1 single bed, an old space heater, a round wooden table, a rattling fridge.
There's some dry food here, clean water, thick blankets in the closet, bathrooms in the corner. If you need anything, text me.
Samira nodded. Linda left a piece of paper with her number and the week's schedule. Before leaving, she paused at the door, her eyes softening.
You have a child, don't you?
Yes, a girl, in Nepal.
Someday, if things go well, you'll be able to bring her here.
Samira didn't answer. The door closed behind Linda, and the hum of the SUV faded into the wind. She stood still in the silent room. The heater clicked on with a low, weary sigh. She didn't take off her coat, just her shoes. She pulled the suitcase close to the bed and opened it. The first layer held neatly folded clothes. Beneath them, a clear plastic bag. Inside it, a photo, a letter, and a small fabric Buddhist amulet, edges frayed. She took the photo out. Her and her daughter standing under a mango tree, sunlight threading through their hair, both smiling. It was taken the day before Ramesh, her husband, disappeared. He'd been a freelance journalist writing about a string of political corruption cases in the Highlands. He wasn't afraid. She had once blamed him for that. The night he left to interview a former politician, it poured rain. The next morning, a call came. There'd been gunshots, a man down. When she arrived, no one was there. No body, no news, only his phone split in two on the ground. Her family told her to stay quiet. "Don't make it worse, child. You still have your daughter." But Samira knew. If she stayed, someday her daughter would have to learn that same silence. So she ran. The first flight, Kathmandu to Kuala Lumpur, then Manila, then Guam. Finally, the refugee camp in New York. 6 months, 4 interviews, 2 medical checks. She couldn't remember how many papers she'd signed. But she remembered one thing clearly. Through all the questions they asked, not one person asked if she could still cry. Samira set the photo on the windowsill and unfolded the letter, written by her daughter, dictated through her grandmother's hand. "Mama, today I brushed my teeth twice. I went to school on time. Are you well? Is there snow in America? Grandma says you'll call soon. I'll wait." The letter had no date, but Samira knew it was more than 2 months old. She hadn't been allowed to call, not until her settlement was confirmed. Every time she thought of it, she bit her lip until it bled. She didn't cry. Since her husband's death, her tears had turned to stone. Only her heart still moved, quietly, persistently, like the old heater in a Maine winter. She sat on the bed, pulled the blanket around her, and curled up. No lights, no sound, eyes fixed on the window, where snow kept falling, as if spring had never existed. And in the dark a small prayer rose in Nepali. "Please, let me stay. Not because I am strong, but because I have nowhere else to go." When the clock struck 4 sharp metallic chimes, Samira opened her eyes without needing the sound. She had been awake for a while, staring into the dark, tracing the low wooden ceiling, listening to the wind slip through the cracks like fingers tapping softly on the walls. She got out of bed, washed her face with cold water, brushed her hair, and put on the heavy coat Linda had left behind. The old boots on her feet slid a little but held firm enough for the soft snow outside. The world beyond the door was utterly still, a sky the color of ash, trees frozen mid-breath, and snow falling sparse and soundless. Linda arrived at exactly 8. She wore a thick fur-lined coat and a navy scarf, holding a large cup of coffee. She didn't speak at first, only nodded and gestured gently for Samira to get in.
Colder this morning. The wind's coming off the lake.
Samira nodded, hands clasped in her lap, eyes on the fogged-up window.
People at the fire station don't talk much. Mainers. Quiet folks, but steady. If someone doesn't say hello, don't take it personally. It's not rudeness, just privacy.
Samira smiled faintly, a polite, practiced smile, the kind carried by those who have lived through too many borders, too many systems, too many gazes. The car turned down a road heavy with snow. The fire station appeared at the bottom of the hill, a one-story brick building with an American flag hanging motionless in the cold wind. Inside, 3 red fire trucks rested in the garage, the roof so thick with snow it nearly hid the sign. Linda led her through a side door, down a narrow hall, into a small kitchen tucked behind the main room. A young man was washing mugs at the sink, while another, back turned, stared at a control screen.
Samira, this is the kitchen. You'll make morning coffee, clean the lunch area, keep things tidy. Each shift's 4 hours. When it's quiet, you can step out back for air. No one will bother you here.
The man at the sink turned, maybe in his 20s, curly hair, glasses. He smiled and nodded.
Hey, I'm Jordan. Started here last month.
Hello.
Her voice was small but clear. Jordan nodded again and headed for the garage. Linda watched him go, then leaned closer.
He's easier to talk to, the other one.
She tilted her head toward the man still facing the screen.
That's the captain, Caleb. Been here longer than I've worked this job. Lives alone. Doesn't talk much. But he's not unkind. Don't worry.
Samira nodded. She took off her gloves, washed her hands in the cold water, and began familiarizing herself with the place. The coffee maker, the fridge, the sink, the cabinets of mugs. Everything was spotless yet worn, like a school kitchen from the 1980s. She brewed a fresh pot. The smell drifted gently through the quiet, like smoke from incense. No sound of food. No music. No laughter. She understood immediately. This wasn't a place for easy talk. Pouring the first cup, she set it on a wooden tray and carried it to the work table where Caleb sat. He wore his captain's jacket, pen in hand, eyes fixed on a fire response map spread across the desk.
Coffee, sir.
Caleb didn't look up. He simply reached out, took the cup and gave a small automatic nod. Samira returned to the kitchen, unbothered. In refugee camps, every conversation began with silence. One person spoke, the other didn't. Then a few days later, someone would ask to borrow a spoon, and another day they'd share a piece of bread. A young blonde woman in a navy uniform entered, nodded at Samira without a word, took her coffee and left. A moment later, an older man with silver beard did the same. A brief glance, then gone. Samira tidied the sink, wiped the counters, checked the oven. She moved carefully, instinctively, orderly, patient, not expecting praise. When she finished, she stood by the small window at the back, looking out. The snow fell steadily, blanketing the yard. A squirrel dashed across, leaving tiny, comma-shaped prints in the white. Footsteps sounded behind her. Caleb walked in, refilling his cup. Samira stepped aside, not seeking eye contact. This time, though, he spoke, his voice low and rough.
Linda said you cooked in New York?
Yes, refugee intake center. I worked in the kitchen.
Was the food any good?
Samira gave a quiet laugh, one without clear meaning.
Enough to live on.
Caleb nodded, sipped, set his cup down, and left without another word. For Samira, that alone felt like progress. She worked through the rest of the morning. Jordan stopped by a few times, offering short instructions. Where to empty the bins, when to take breaks, how to know if an alarm sounded. His tone was brisk but kind, not friendly, not distant, just steady.
If the siren goes off, stay put. Unless someone calls you. You're not part of the rescue crew. Just keep this area calm and clean.
Yes, I understand.
Before she left, Linda returned to pick her up. In the car, she asked,
How was it?
Quiet. People here are quiet.
They are. In Maine, that's how life is. But don't mistake silence for dislike. Sometimes it's just caution.
Samira looked out the window. The snow was still falling, white to the point of invisibility. But inside her, something faint, like the warmth of that morning's coffee, had begun to thaw. By late morning, the snow had thickened. When Samira lifted her head from the sink, she saw white flakes, wide as moth wings, streaming hard outside the small kitchen window. The sky was gone, as if someone had draped a giant white sheet over the entire town. Linda returned to the station near noon, phone in hand, her brow furrowed.
Forecast says the snow will last till morning. Roads are closed for now. We're stuck here.
Samira nodded, unsurprised. She was used to the words, "can't go back." For the past 2 years, every place she'd been had been temporary. She'd lived in shelters without power, in churches, in shipping containers turned into dorms, even in the hallway of an abandoned hospital. Compared to those, the small cabin in Maine was a kind of luxury.
There's a night duty room in the back. You can sleep there. I've asked someone to bring extra blankets.
Samira bowed her head.
Thank you.
When the noon siren sounded, a deep, drawn-out breath from the fire station's lungs, the morning crew gathered in the common room. The dining area was small, one long pine table, 8 chairs, and an old humming fridge in the corner. A map of Addison County hung on the wall, with names scrawled beneath in marker. This week's shift: Caleb, Jordan, Liz, Frank. Samira set down a pot of white bean soup she'd been simmering since dawn. It wasn't rich, but it was warm. Garlic butter toast sat in a wicker basket beside it. She said nothing when the others arrived, just stood by the stove, towel in hand. Jordan was the first to sit. He looked at her and nodded.
Thanks for cooking.
She smiled faintly. Liz, the blonde firefighter, came next, wordless, ladling soup into her bowl. Then Frank, a salt-and-pepper-haired man, pulled out a chair and nodded toward Caleb as he entered from the garage. Caleb took the head of the table. His eyes moved over the pot of soup, then down to the cold coffee cup in front of him. Samira couldn't read his thoughts, but for the first time, he wasn't looking at paperwork while eating. She stepped closer to pour Jordan a refill. Her hand brushed the metal ladle. Suddenly, Jordan turned to her, voice quiet but clear.
Where are you from?
The room paused, just for a second. No one reacted, but no one laughed either. Samira lifted her gaze. She didn't avoid his eyes, yet there was caution there, the kind one has before stepping into deep water.
Nepal?
Just one word, but it echoed softly through the snow-filled air. Jordan nodded.
That's far. You must not be used to cold like this.
We have snow there, just not this much.
Frank set his spoon down and took a drink of water. Liz kept her eyes on her bowl. Caleb said nothing, but Samira felt his gaze linger on her face a heartbeat longer than before. No one asked anything else. She turned back to the kitchen, arranging the bread. Her fingers were dry, her knuckles stiff from the chill, but she didn't complain. She'd learned long ago that complaints were a luxury, something for those who still believed life owed them something. After lunch, the room emptied quietly. Jordan helped her stack dishes, but didn't speak further. Frank and Liz went to check the trucks. Caleb was last to stand. He picked up his half-finished coffee, and before leaving he said, not looking at her but evenly,
Coffee's better today.
Samira didn't answer, but for the first time she felt something warm flicker inside her, like hands held near a flame, if only for a moment. She cleaned the dining room alone, the clink of utensils, the running water, the whisper of snow beyond the window. Together they made a small, wordless rhythm. Nothing special, but it was life. When she stepped outside to take out the trash, the snow had buried the ground completely. No tire tracks, no birds in the air, only a vast, quiet whiteness, beautiful, cold, and utterly alone. Night came faster than Samira expected. By the time she'd rinsed the last pot of soup, dried the sink, and folded the towel, the sky outside had turned black and heavy, like ink spilled across the world. Snow was still falling, no longer in drifting flakes, but in thick, relentless sheets, as if the sky were emptying out the last of winter. Linda had left earlier that afternoon, after dropping off a bag of blankets, a pillow, and a few packets of crackers in the small restroom behind the garage. Samira carried the bag inside and arranged the space simply. An old mattress pushed against the wall, a pillow stiff as stone, 2 thin blankets. No window. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly, like a mosquito, but it was warm, at least for a while. Around 10, she sat cross-legged on the mattress, holding a small notebook of English vocabulary, when a faint click came from the corner. The heater under the side lamp sputtered out. The buzzing stopped. The light flickered twice, then died. Samira sat upright. First came silence, then the slow creep of cold rising from the floor, the kind that seeped through layers, patient and merciless. She wrapped another blanket around her shoulders. Opening the door, she stepped into the hallway. The darkness there had weight, shape. The only light came from a red emergency bulb glowing faintly at the far end, like dried blood. She remembered Linda mentioning an extra blanket cabinet near the boiler room. Samira moved carefully down the corridor, her steps as cautious as if she were walking along a live wire. As she neared the corner, she heard it, the sound of metal against metal. A soft clank, then the twist of a wrench. A flashlight beam spilled out from a narrow gap. She turned the corner and saw Caleb. He was kneeling under the main heating pipe, wearing a long-sleeved shirt, shoulders trembling slightly from the cold, a small toolkit in his hands. The flashlight lay tilted on the floor, its light cutting across his face, half in glow, half in shadow. He didn't see her right away. He was focused on a loose pipe joint, lips pressed tight, brows drawn in. Not angry, just deeply concentrated, the kind of focus that leaves no room for expression. Samira stood still for a moment, unsure whether to speak. Then she slowly bent down, turned on the flashlight on her cheap phone and aimed it toward his hands. Steady, not too bright. Caleb flinched slightly, turning his head. Their eyes met, for the first time. Not a passing glance, not a polite nod. A real look. From one pair of eyes to another. Empty, not unfriendly, not guarded. Just the shared look of two people who had both lost things, who had both survived long silences, long winters, long stretches of being unseen. Caleb said nothing, but he nodded once. Samira didn't move away. She kept the light steady. No shaking, no question of, "Do you need help?" Because she knew. Some people don't need help. They just need to be left in peace while doing something good. After a while, he tightened the last bolt and pressed the switch. The heater shuddered, coughed once, foot. Then a soft red glow began to spread through the pipe, slow but alive. They both stood there for a moment, watching the line of light bloom like a flame rekindled after a storm. Caleb spoke quietly, still not looking at her.
Thanks for the light.
Samira nodded. No smile, no reply needed. They turned almost at the same time, not planned but in rhythm, each returning to their own blanket, their own narrow bed, their own private cold. But that night, she slept. Not deeply, but enough. Enough to forget a few hours of wind, enough to dream of a kitchen with real fire, not just the hum of an electric one. Morning came white, as if the night before had never passed. The snow wasn't as heavy as it had been, but thick enough to swallow every sound. The whole town seemed to be holding its breath. Samira woke early, earlier than her alarm. She washed her face with cold water, brushed her hair, and folded the blanket with careful precision, the way she used to in the refugee camp. Those habits stayed with her. They were her way of staying whole in a world too wide, too indifferent. In the kitchen, the early light filtered through frosted glass, softening everything. The red brick walls, the wooden table, the coffee machine still warm from the night before. She decided to make coffee her own way. In her bag, she still kept a small pouch of Nepali coffee. Not the instant kind, but ground beans given by another refugee back in Syracuse during 3 nights they had shared the same shelter. The flavor was strong, lightly spicy, brewed with cardamom and ginger. She boiled water in a small aluminum pot, dropped in a few slices of dried ginger, a crushed pod of cardamom, then the coffee. The aroma rose slowly, not sharp like machine-brewed coffee, but earthy, wooden, like the scent of a mountain morning, unhurried, steady. Caleb entered just as she turned off the stove. He wore a black sweater, jacket half on, hair slightly tousled, the same old mug in his hand. Samira poured the coffee into a white cup and placed it on the table in front of him. No words, no smile, just a hot cup between two strangers. Caleb looked down at it, his brow furrowing slightly as if analyzing a foreign substance.
Doesn't smell like the usual coffee.
Napal.
He lifted the cup, took a sip. His face didn't change, but his eyes opened a touch wider. Not surprise, not emotion, just a quiet recognition so subtle it could have been missed.
Not bad.
Samira turned away, but something inside her loosened. Not hope, exactly, but a small crack across the ice. And maybe that was enough. Caleb sat down, cup in hand. He said nothing more. Samira went back to wiping counters and stacking dishes. Yet between them, something new hung in the air. Not a word, not a feeling, but the scent of coffee. Still. Gentle. Staying. A few minutes later, Jordan walked in, half awake, wearing a grey hoodie, hair damp. He sniffed the air and frowned slightly.
New coffee smell?
Samira nodded.
Smells good? You make it?
Mm-hmm.
What's that spicy note?
Ginger, cardamom.
Jordan took a sip and smiled.
Not bad at all.
Caleb drank another mouthful but didn't speak. When he stood, though, he set his cup down, not by the sink as usual, but close to where Samira stood, just near enough for the gesture to be noticed. She didn't look after him, but she heard his steps leaving the room, slow, steady, like a man walking past something he couldn't yet name. By afternoon, the snow had stopped. The sky stayed a flat grey, but the ground had been partly cleared, revealing cracked concrete beneath. There was no sun, no wind, just the kind of quiet that made every sound sharper. Footsteps on the floor, the creak of old wood, the soft breath of a person in a small kitchen. Samira was wiping down the table when she heard it. A faint sound, like claws brushing against the wooden floor. She froze, tilted her head, listened. There it was again, soft, but clearly not human. She stepped toward the kitchen door and peeked down the hallway. A small, pale grey shadow darted across the corner. She thought she imagined it, until a soft meow came from behind the supply cabinet. She crouched, carefully, and met a pair of green eyes staring back from the narrow space beneath the cabinet. A stray cat, thin, fur puffed from cold, eyes wide with the kind of alertness that comes from a lifetime of running. Samira didn't move. She watched it. It watched her. For a moment neither did anything. Then it slipped back into the dark. She returned to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and tore a few pieces of leftover ham. Quietly, she scattered them on the floor, one by one, leading toward the break room. No calling, no coaxing, just a trail of scent, like drawing a path with silence. When she straightened, Caleb was standing at the end of the hallway, arms folded, eyes flicking from the crumbs on the floor to her face.
Something just ran past.
Cat, stray.
Came in through the pipes?
Maybe looking for warmth.
He nodded, stepping closer, bending to pick up one of the meat scraps. He sniffed it, not with disgust, but inspection, the habit of someone who noticed small things.
It's going down to 15 below tonight. It won't make it out there.
Samira looked at him. Her eyes weren't questioning, only quietly aligned with his. She didn't say, "It's like me." But her gaze, her breath, and the silence between them said enough for anyone paying attention. Caleb disappeared into the supply room and came back with an old plastic crate. He opened the lid, lined it with some worn blankets and set it in a corner of the lounge. Samira brought over a small bowl of clean water. Neither told the other what to do. Each simply knew their part, as if they'd done this before, in other lives. A soft rustle came from behind the cabinet. The cat reappeared. Cautious steps, eyes fixed on them. This time, it didn't retreat when Samira knelt down. She extended her hand, palm open, not touching, just near the floor. The cat crept forward, paused a hand's length away, sniffed, stared, then slipped back again. Caleb watched from behind, hands on his hips. He said nothing for a while. When the cat returned, slower, braver, He murmured.
Maybe it's trying to see if it's allowed to stay.
Samira looked up at him. She didn't smile, not really, but her lips curved faintly. That quiet gesture that happens when something brushes too close to your heart. Then the cat took another step, each paw a question, wordless. Finally, it reached the nearest piece of meat, bit down gently, and began to eat. Caleb's voice dropped, almost amused.
Guess you won.
Samira laughed, soft, brief. The first sound of laughter she'd made inside the fire station. Caleb turned toward her. After a second's hesitation, he smiled too. Not broadly, not showing teeth, just a small broken line at the corner of his mouth, like someone rediscovering how. The cat looked up at them, then turned away, slipping into the crate. No struggle, no hiss. It curled into the old blankets as if it had always belonged there. Samira stood, brushed her hands off. Caleb picked up the lid but didn't close it, leaving the opening free, in case the cat chose to come and go. They exchanged one more look, said nothing. But something had shifted. Not friendship, not yet closeness, just recognition. As Samira returned to the kitchen, she heard Caleb's voice, low enough for her to hear, quiet enough to sound like he was talking to himself.
Stray cats don't always leave.
She didn't answer, but her hand tightened around the handle of her teacup. Tonight, she thought, might not be as cold as the ones before. 3 days after the stray cat arrived, the town seemed to fall into a slower rhythm. No sudden blizzards, no major alarms, just the small calls, a car slipping on ice, an old man stuck in his garage, a delivery truck stalled by the bridge. The fire station still breathed and functioned, but like some great animal in hibernation, eyes closed, ears half alert, its heart beating slow and deep. On the duty roster pinned to the wall, the day was marked as calm. Jordan had the morning shift, off by 3. Liz had been sent to the next county to inspect winter gear. Frank was on 3 days' leave to visit his newborn grandson. That left Caleb and Samira for the night shift. An unofficial choice, but the right one. The station didn't need more than 2 people each night, 1 senior officer, Caleb, and 1 assistant, Samira. Enough to handle an emergency call if it came, enough to coordinate and drive, and quiet enough that if something needed to be said, no one else would overhear. That evening was cold, but dry. The wind moved in straight lines, not whipping up snow, but humming low against the roof. In the common room, a dim amber light washed over everything. The old wooden table, the water dispenser, the white ceramic cup Samira used every night. She was sealing a large envelope, bigger than usual, thick with printed photos, coloured drawings, and a folded bill tucked between 2 sheets of paper, when Caleb walked in.
A letter?
Home.
He poured hot water into a teapot. The scent of peppermint rose, clear and soft, the kind that opens your lungs on a winter day. Samira didn't stand. She slid the envelope aside to make space for the tray. Caleb poured 2 cups, then sat across from her, as if this had been their quiet ritual all week.
For my daughter.
He looked up, not saying oh or really, just waiting.
Mira. She's 10. Lives in Kathmandu with my mother. I send her letters every month, with pictures, drawings, stickers. I don't know if she reads them all, but I keep sending.
Caleb turned the cup in his hand, steam clouding his glasses. Beneath the table, Asha, the stray cat, curled into a grey ball, tail twitching at the sound of pouring tea.
I once promised to bring her here in 6 months. It's been over 2 years now. I don't call often. She keeps asking, "Mama, are you coming back?" And I never know what to say.
Her voice didn't shake, but there was an emptiness behind the words, like each sentence was a careful step across thin ice. Caleb nodded slowly, setting his cup down.
She misses you, even if you can't be sure of it.
I'm afraid one day she'll stop waiting.
The wind moaned through the window seams. Inside, only the quiet drip of tea and the steady breath of 2 people holding themselves together.
You're a good mother.
Samira looked up. She studied his face, not to check if he meant it, but as if wondering whether anyone had ever said those words to her before.
I'm just trying to live, so that when she grows up, she won't feel ashamed that her mother had to leave.
Caleb didn't answer. He refilled her cup, his hand steady. Asha stretched, yawned, and settled against Samira's feet, as if warmth were something it could finally trust.
You didn't leave her. You chose to live. So one day you could bring her here. That's not abandonment. That's sacrifice.
Samira said nothing. Her fingers stayed around the cup, holding on to something fragile but real.
I named the cat Asha. In Nepali, it means hope. It's the only thing I can still send to my daughter.
Caleb looked down at the cat. It didn't lift its head, but its quiet presence, along with her words, made the room feel smaller, fuller, almost sacred. And that night, inside the old fire station, just two people, a cat, and a letter waiting to be mailed. A refugee mother was seen. Not through pity, but through the stillness of recognition. That night, the town slept early. The snowstorm from the afternoon had passed, leaving behind a cold white blanket draped over rooftops, streets, and the few streetlights that still glowed. The fire station stood motionless, a dark red block breathing thin wisps of smoke from its chimney, the only sign that life still flickered inside. Samira made tea the same way she did every night. Steam rose from the porcelain pot, smelling of peppermint laced with dried ginger. She had grown used to preparing 2 cups, one for herself, one for Caleb, placed on his left side where he always sat to write reports, scribble notes, or simply sit in silence. Caleb was checking the power panel along the wall. Tonight's shift was just the 2 of them. Jordan had left that afternoon, Liz hadn't returned yet, and Frank was still on leave. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew, when the snow eased, the night shift only needed 2 people. Lately, those 2 names were always the same, Caleb and Samira. 9:17 p.m. The entire building went dark. The sharp click of the main breaker echoed through the perfect silence. The heater stopped humming. The overhead lights died. Even the air system went still, as if someone had unplugged the world. Samira froze for a few seconds, letting her eyes adjust. Then she pulled a small flashlight from her jacket, a habit left from the years of running, when light was something you carried on your own.
Power's out. Whole block.
Generator?
Frozen solid. No one's tested it in days.
She didn't ask again. Caleb opened the tool cabinet, flipped the emergency switch. Nothing. Everything was dead.
Get in the truck. Now.
The truck?
The battery heater will keep us warm a few hours. We're not waiting out this cold in here.
His tone left no room for debate. Samira nodded, scooped up Asha from her blanket basket, and followed him into the garage. The red fire engine stood in the dark like an old animal asleep. No light from above, no sound. Caleb opened the passenger door. Samira climbed in first. He circled to the driver's side, turned the auxiliary power key. A faint tick. Then a low orange light bloomed across the dashboard, dim but warm. She sat quietly, the cat pressed against her chest, watching the fog gather on the windshield. Caleb leaned back, one hand resting on the steering wheel, as if driving into a night that had no destination. Inside the sealed cabin, every sound grew close. The rhythm of breathing, the soft rustle of fabric, the purr of the cat finding warmth. Samira took 2 cups from her coat pocket, the same tea she'd poured before the blackout, and handed one to him. Caleb didn't say thank you, but took it, sipping slowly. Neither spoke. The quiet inside the truck didn't need filling. Her eyes drifted to the control panel. The amber light from the dashboard brushed across Caleb's wrist, revealing a thin scar running pale across the skin. After a while, Caleb straightened, clearing his throat, not to talk, just out of reflex.
When I first joined the station, I slept in this truck most nights. That winter was colder than this one.
Samira glanced at him briefly, then looked down at Asha.
Were you afraid?
No, just lonely.
The words left his mouth like breath on glass, soft, but heavy enough to leave a mark. A door slightly ajar, not inviting, just proving there was still light behind it. They stayed like that for a while, both hands cold, neither willing to move. Asha yawned, curling deeper into Samira's arms. She wrapped the cat in a wool scarf and rested her hand over its back, tapping gently with each breath. The gesture, so small, so familiar, made Caleb turn his head, not out of curiosity, but understanding. Their eyes met across the narrow space between seats. Not long, not dramatic, but long enough for both to know they were no longer complete strangers. Wind struck the truck's side. Snow slid down the windshield in slow streaks, like silent tears. Samira pulled her scarf higher and closed her eyes, not sleeping, just letting everything inside her go still. Caleb leaned his head back against the seat, eyes open, staring at nothing, floating in the quiet. When the power returned, faint light seeped through the fogged windows. Neither spoke. Caleb shut off the heater, opened the door. Samira lifted the cat and stepped out first. Together, they walked back inside. No words, none needed. They crossed the hallway, where the ceiling lights shone bright again, everything restored, except them. Inside that old truck, on a long winter night, two people hadn't said much, but they'd come to understand each other a little more. And for that night, that was enough. That night, they left the fire truck in silence. No words were spoken. None were needed. The lights inside the station glowed white again, splitting them back into two separate rhythms, two rooms, two breaths, two kinds of quiet. Yet something between them had shifted. Not much, not visible, just a quiet presence, like a thin light spreading softly through fog. Days passed, and then another night. Samira woke suddenly, not from any sound, but from a familiar sensation. The tightness in her chest, the cold at her spine, the damp sweat on her back though the air was freezing. Her eyes opened wide into the dark. The room was still. The heater hummed. Asha was curled at the foot of the bed. But her heart was pounding, as if she had just run through a forest of snow. She sat up, wrapped her arms around her knees, breathing slowly to steady herself. The dream still clung to her, a distant explosion, smoke curling thick, and his face, blurred yet present, turning away. No hand reaching out, no words. Just that hollow sense that someone had left this world without the time to promise anything. She pulled on a sweater and padded softly to the kitchen. She didn't turn on the overhead light, only the small lamp by the counter. The tiles were cold under her bare feet. She paused just long enough to feel that she was still real. Water boiled. She poured ginger tea, then opened a cabinet, took out a white envelope and a fresh sheet of paper, and sat down. This time she wrote slowly.
My dear Mira, tonight I dreamed again. The same dream. Your father standing behind a wall of smoke. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just looked at me. I couldn't hear him, couldn't reach him. It felt like there was a wall between us, but only I could see it.
She stopped writing and looked up. The window was fogged with frost. The night outside hadn't lifted.
Do you still remember your father? I'm afraid that one day his face will fade, from my mind and from your heart. Maybe I'm holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore. But if I don't write it down, will he still live inside you?
She inhaled deeply. The pen still rested in her hand, but the tip no longer touched the page. Asha stirred, blinking once before curling back to sleep. Outside, the wind whispered against the eaves.
I'm doing fine. I cook for people who don't ask too many questions. I sleep in a room where no one knows my name. I drink tea, and I care for a small cat. She's quiet. She doesn't need me to be strong. She only needs me to keep breathing. You're different, my love. You need me to stand, to guide, and I promise, I'm still trying, every day.
She folded the letter, but instead of placing it into the envelope, she sat there a while longer, fingers still holding the paper. Then slowly she tore it in half, then in quarters, then into eighths. The small white pieces, marked with blue ink, fell into the trash like snowflakes drifting through a door crack, silent, formless, without sound. She didn't cry, but her dry eyes weren't from strength, only from a pain long past tears. Samira stood, poured more boiling water into the cup. The tea had gone cold. Winter hadn't left. And memory, even as it faded, still left its footprints behind. The next morning, the sky hung heavy, as if the night had never truly ended. Clouds pressed low over the station roof, and the melting snow lay unevenly across the cracked concrete path, patches of dull grey and fading white. The wind wasn't strong, but it was the kind of cold that slipped beneath skin, down the spine, and stayed. The kind of cold that felt like memory. Samira made coffee. Not the instant kind she usually drank, but real coffee. Ground beans she'd borrowed from Jordan. She prepared it the way Caleb once showed her. Little water, strong, no sugar. She brought out 2 mugs to the duty room. One she placed beside Caleb, who sat at the desk, eyes fixed on the soft blue glow of an old monitor. He didn't look up, but nodded. She sat across from him, a small table between them. Nothing remarkable about the morning, just a fragile calm, enough to make them both feel they weren't falling. Caleb lifted the cup, took a sip, his gaze still on the screen. Then, slowly, he set it down and closed his eyes for a moment. Not out of weariness or pain, but as if some long-forgotten sound had just brushed past him. Samira said nothing, yet the quiet itself seemed to draw words out of him.
Back then, I didn't know grief had a smell.
Samira looked up. He still wasn't looking at her, just speaking into the air.
Smoke, melted plastic, wet wood. After that fire, I could smell it everywhere. My shirt, the stove, even my own hair after a shower.
She stayed silent, fingers wrapped around the mug, letting the warmth seep into her palms.
My wife died in a house fire, at home. Nothing big, just a short circuit on the 2nd floor, but enough to...
He stopped. Not because it hurt too much to speak, but because he was rewinding the old reel, trying to find the right frame to start again.
I was on night shift that day. By the time I got there, the house was nearly gone. They said she ran back inside to grab a photo album.
He gave a faint laugh, the kind that had no sound, only a sad motion at the edge of his mouth.
I was always there, every day, home on time, shoveling snow, changing batteries, fixing leaks. No arguments, no forgetting anniversaries. But one day I realized, for all those years, I had lived next to her, not with her.
Samira didn't speak. She watched him, really watched. Not only the words, but the pauses between them.
My son left after the funeral, no shouting, no tears. Just packed his bag, left a note that said, "Don't call, I don't need a reason."
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper, creased at the corners. He didn't show it to her, just ran a thumb over it, the way someone touches a scar that has become part of their skin.
I've never told anyone, not because I'm afraid, but because I never thought anyone would want to hear about a father whose son didn't even bother giving a reason to leave.
Maybe he thought you didn't need to hear one.
For the first time, Caleb looked at her, not surprised, just grateful. They stayed that way. One speaking, one listening. No comfort offered, no soothing words, only presence. And sometimes that's all a person needs to keep from disappearing into themselves. Caleb lifted his cup again, drank the last sip. He didn't speak further, but in that quiet room there was ash cooling, and there was a small fire beginning again, slow, steady, between 2 people who had once believed they had already burned out. Saturday morning arrived grey as slate, though the snow had finally stopped. Sheets of ice began to crack and fall from the rooftops, breaking softly against the ground. The air was still cold, but there was something in the wind, a faint shift that made one think winter was beginning to turn. Samira was boiling water for tea when a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Caleb standing there, hands in the pockets of his thick coat, a trace of snow clinging to his shoulders.
Got plans this morning?
Is something wrong?
Winter farmers market. Happens every couple of weeks. I'm going for jam. Thought you might want to come along.
She didn't ask why, she just nodded. Caleb's pickup truck was old, the interior faintly smelling of plastic and stale tobacco. He didn't turn on the radio, and she didn't speak. Outside, the only sounds were the tires grinding snow and the wind pressing against the windshield. The market was set up inside the community hall near the old elementary school. Outside, a few kids were throwing snowballs. Inside, it was warm, golden lit, rows of wooden stalls and the mingled scents of cinnamon, strawberry jam, and handmade soap. The air carried the comfort of something remembered, like a kind memory brought out into the cold to breathe. Samira walked slowly, taking everything in. The jars of dark honey, the knitted scarves, the cubes of cheese arranged neatly on wooden trays. Caleb walked beside her, not too close, but never far. Whenever she stopped, he stopped. When she lingered, he stood a step behind, careful not to disturb her quiet way of observing. They hadn't bought anything for more than 20 minutes. Just walked, looked, and kept that space, far enough not to crowd, close enough not to lose each other. Then Samira paused at a stall selling cinnamon pastries. The vendor, a woman with warm brown skin and a red headscarf, smiled.
Want a sample, hon?
Samira nodded. She took a small piece, then Caleb took one too. Butter, cinnamon, and sugar melted together on their tongues.
We don't have this in Nepal, but the smell of cinnamon, that's familiar.
What do you use it for?
Tea and medicine for colds. The elders love mixing it with hot honey.
Caleb nodded, not just in response, but as if tucking away a note for later. They continued walking, this time closer. Neither said a word, but with every step, the distance between them adjusted on its own. Their hands didn't touch, their shoulders didn't brush. Yet the space between them no longer felt cold. At the last stall, jars of jam lined the table. Raspberry, orange, blueberry, peach. Caleb picked up 2 jars of raspberry and 1 of orange. Samira lifted a jar of pale apricot, holding it up to the light before smelling it.
I like this one. It's a little tart, kind of like...
She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. On the drive back, neither spoke, but the silence was easy now, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Back at the station, Caleb carried the bags into the kitchen. Before leaving, he placed the jar of apricot jam on the table in front of her.
That one's yours.
Thank you, I'll use it for cookies.
You bake?
A little. My mother taught me. What about you?
I bake frozen pizza.
They both laughed, small but real. When she headed back to her room, Caleb stayed behind, wiping the counter with a clean cloth. No goodbyes, no need. That morning, no deep truths were shared, no personal questions asked, just 2 people walking side by side through a winter market, quietly, simply, and neither feeling alone. Monday morning. The air was softer, though the snow still clung to the window ledge, melting in slow, steady drops, like the tick of a leaking clock in an old house. Samira washed the dishes later than usual because Jordan, who'd taken the night shift, had slept in. He stumbled out near 9, eyes red, voice hoarse with sleep, mumbling an apology. Samira just smiled, poured him another cup of coffee, and said nothing. She prepared 2 mugs, one for herself, one for Caleb. He was always there early. No one ever saw him arrive. But every morning the duty room lights were already on, his chair warm, his mug half empty. She pushed the door open, stepping inside as usual, intending to set the cup down and leave, but her eyes stopped. Beneath the corner of the duty logbook was a photograph, its edge just peeking out. Samira hesitated, then gently slid the notebook aside. 3 people. A woman with short hair, turned slightly to the side, wearing a thick coat. A teenage boy, maybe 17, hands in his pockets, eyes down, and behind them, off to the right, a tall man. Caleb, younger, with more hair and a faint, uncertain smile. None of them were smiling fully, none stood close, yet the whole frame was covered in a soft autumn light, a pale gold filtering through a white fence in the background, making the moment look like a memory no one had quite been ready to lose. Samira stood still for a long time, not out of curiosity, but because something in that image caught in her chest, like seeing another version of all she had once lost. The door opened softly behind her. Caleb stepped in, holding a mug of coffee, his coat dusted with ash from the stove. He saw her looking at the photo, but said nothing. He didn't hide it either.
Your family?
Caleb nodded slightly.
Your son. How old was he then?
17. He'd be close to 30 now. His name's David.
She nodded, eyes still on the picture.
It looks like no one really wanted to take it, but they still stood there.
I told them to come outside. The light was good that day. No one objected, but no one smiled either. I took it on an old phone. My hand shook a little. That's why it's blurred.
Samira tilted her head.
Do they know you kept it?
Not sure. After my wife's funeral, David packed his things, left the next day, left a note that said, "Don't call."
There was no anger in Caleb's voice, no grief either, just the dust of time settled over a truth that had refused to fade.
You didn't call?
Once, the phone was off. I didn't try again.
Samira looked at the photograph. She didn't touch it, but her fingers rested lightly on the edge of the table. Not a gesture of comfort, just a small way of saying I'm still here.
I have a picture like that too. Just fewer people in it. My daughter, me, and the empty space where my husband should have stood.
Caleb didn't respond. He took a sip of coffee, but he didn't put the photo away, didn't hide it as before.
My mother once said, if you need to look to remember, the memory wasn't strong enough. But I think sometimes we keep photos to remind ourselves that once we did stand together.
When she rose to leave, he spoke, quietly, almost like a confession.
Don't tell Jordan. I don't want to be the old man who never shuts up about the past.
I won't, but if you want, I can remember it for you.
Caleb didn't smile, but his eyes softened, as if some frozen part of him had just been gently tapped awake. That night, in her room, Samira didn't write a letter. She didn't brew tea. She opened her small notebook and began to draw. Not a face, not a scene, but a kind of light, that faint, late autumn glow that once fell across 3 people, and then fell away forever. That afternoon, the snow didn't fall, but the cold still slipped in, a quiet reminder that the season wasn't ready to leave. Jordan accepted the mail from the postman, a few bills, a small package for the repair room, and one white envelope, thin but weighted, as if it carried more than paper inside, as if something inside it was waiting to drop heavily into the heart of whoever opened it. He set everything on the kitchen counter, sorted through the pile, and called out, "Samira, there's a letter for you." She stepped out, just back from the laundry room. Her hands still smelled faintly of soap. She wiped them on her apron, then reached for the envelope. In the corner was the blue seal of the Federal Immigration and Refugee Agency. The header, printed in bold, "Case Review, Final Decision." Samira didn't open it right away. She just held it, feeling the thickness of the paper, then nodded briefly to Jordan. Neither said a word. She walked back to her room, closed the door, but didn't lock it. The envelope sat on the table. She looked at it as if it were a blade wrapped in cloth, knowing it would cut, yet hesitating to uncover the edge. Nearly 10 minutes passed. She didn't touch it. She poured water, folded laundry, wiped the window pane, opened the closet, then shut it again. Movements without purpose, only to delay the inevitable. Finally, she sat down, pulled a small letter opener from the drawer. Her hands trembled, but her motion was firm. 1 sheet, 1 opening line. After review of all submitted materials, testimonies, and evidence, the Federal Immigration Agency is unable to approve the asylum application of Ms. Samira Gailey. Her eyes stopped at unable. Such a distinctly American phrase. Neutral, formal, polite, and cold. Cold like steel. She read it again, then again, each word sinking deeper into her chest. This decision is final. Any appeal must be filed within 15 days. Failure to do so will result in loss of legal residency status. She turned the page over. Blank, except for 1 italic line at the bottom. We understand this decision may be difficult. Please contact your local immigration support organization for further assistance. Samira laughed, softly. A laugh without bitterness or irony, only the faint reflex of a body refusing to shatter. She placed the paper on the table, folded it, unfolded it, folded it again, then tore it in half. The pieces fell like 2 dead snowflakes. But then she picked them up again, found some tape, pressed the edges together. They didn't align perfectly, the words fractured but still readable. She stared at the patched letter. No longer a decision, not quite a letter either. Just a remnant of something ending. Then once more she tore it apart, this time into 4. No one saw, no sobs, no tears. She opened a drawer and pulled out another envelope. Old, yellowed. Her daughter's name, Mira, written in soft purple ink. Samira slipped the torn letter inside, along with a faded photo of the two of them, then folded it shut and placed it in a small wooden box. She didn't plan to tell Caleb or Jordan or anyone, not out of shame, just exhaustion. Because after a long enough journey, sometimes a person simply runs out of strength to ask for hope again. Night came. The station quieted. Outside, the wind passed in slow waves. Samira sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and tried to write to Mira. But her hand stopped. The first word wouldn't form. She looked around the room, the grey scarf, the small cat curled on her pillow, the stillness of everything temporary yet intact. She exhaled. A long, steady breath, not because of the letter, but because tomorrow would still come, and she needed to be here for it. Samira was folding laundry in the small washroom behind the kitchen. Night had fallen, and the snow outside drifted soundlessly beneath the porch light. She hadn't turned on any music, no quiet humming like she used to, only the rustle of fabric and the steady hum of the dryer keeping its own rhythm. Caleb walked past the hallway, intending to grab a clean towel, when he stopped. The yellow light from the half-open door spilled across the floor. He glanced in, saw Samira folding a towel, slow, deliberate, almost unnaturally so. She folded the same shirt 3 times. On the table beside her, a cup of tea sat untouched, cold for hours. For 3 days, she hadn't smiled, hadn't sung, hadn't met anyone's eyes for more than a moment. Yesterday at lunch, she'd taken one small bite, then cleared the table quickly, as if afraid someone might notice. Caleb tapped gently on the open door. She didn't turn. He stepped inside, holding the cold cup, leaning against the frame.
You all right?
Samira finished folding the shirt, placed it neatly on the pile, then turned. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from not sleeping.
I'm working, eating, breathing, so I guess I'm all right.
Caleb didn't ask more, but he didn't leave either. The silence between them, once easy, now pressed heavy.
You know, don't you?
No one said anything, but I can tell.
They denied me, my asylum case.
Her voice didn't crack, didn't waver, but every word seemed to weigh down her chest. Not a sudden blow, but a fracture spreading slowly through time. Caleb took a step forward, his fingers tightening around the cup.
What will you do?
I have 15 days to appeal, but I don't know if there's anything left to say.
Caleb set the cup down on the dryer, his gaze steady, quiet, but resolute.
Then marry me.
She didn't flinch, didn't look shocked, didn't even ask him to repeat it. It was as if she had already imagined this moment, just never thought it would come from him, on a night when the snow fell softly and the only sound was the breath of a tired machine.
The first time I got married, it was arranged. My parents said, he's a good man. And he was. We were lucky. We loved each other. But I was never the one who chose. If I marry you for papers, it's the same thing. I'd be living again on someone else's kindness.
Caleb said nothing, didn't defend himself. He simply slipped his hands into his coat pockets as if trying to keep the warmth from leaving a room that had suddenly gone colder.
One day my daughter will ask why her mother left, why she didn't come back. I want to tell her, I did everything I could, but I didn't trade away who I was. If I stay for love, she'll believe in love. If I stay by contract, she'll learn that survival is bargaining, that her mother had to bargain. I want her to know her mother once stood upright, unrescued, unbent.
Caleb nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel cornered.
I know, and thank you.
She looked at him. Not distant, just calm. The kind of calm that comes when you've refused something you once dreamed of because now you want something truer.
I want to stay, but if I stay, it has to be because of me.
The small room fell quiet again. But this time, the silence wasn't regret. It was closure. Gentle, mutual, and enough for them both to understand. From here, they would keep walking, even if their paths diverged. That night the snow fell thick. Not in flurries, not in bursts, just steady, quiet, like the breath of an old man sleeping deeply, peacefully, endlessly. Caleb couldn't sleep. He went downstairs for water, looked out the kitchen window, and saw the path in front of the station already buried. The porch light reached only a small, pale circle in the white, and that dim, frozen glow made it impossible for him to sit still. He put on his coat, wrapped a scarf, pulled a wool hat over his ears and stepped outside. He didn't turn on the yard light. The only glow came from the kitchen window behind him, faintly outlining his back against the snow. He wasn't trying to accomplish anything. He just started shoveling. A pointless task at midnight, maybe, but it gave his hands something to do, proof that he could still move something in the world. Each lift of the shovel was clean, measured, not hurried, not forceful, as if he were clearing away a layer of memory or stirring up what had long been frozen inside him. On the second floor, Samira stood behind the window. She hadn't turned on the light or touched the curtain, but she stood close enough to see him through the thin pane of glass. She didn't call out, didn't open the door, didn't go down to help, but she didn't look away either. Her arms folded around herself as if keeping her heart from dissolving into the snow. They didn't speak. They didn't meet eyes. But something passed between them, not distance, not closeness, a kind of understanding that exists only between people who have both survived loss. Caleb kept shoveling. The snow kept falling. His back bent slightly with each motion, carrying the quiet weight of all the things that could never be said aloud. Samira stayed where she was, still, but she didn't turn away. She knew he didn't need help, and he knew she was watching. In that white, silent world, there were only two figures, one working, one witnessing, both holding on, in their own ways, to something fragile. A trace of warmth, a measure of strength, a moment of calm before the storm neither could stop. That morning, the snow had stopped. The sky was a dull grey, but a thin strip of pale light glimmered at the horizon, the kind that hinted a season was turning, even if the ground was still frozen and the air still heavy. Samira woke early, no alarm, no call. She just knew this was the day something needed to be done. The station was quiet. Jordan hadn't arrived yet. Caleb was either still asleep or had gone out before dawn. Only Asha padded softly behind her, then leapt onto the window ledge, curling into a small grey coil. She brewed tea, not coffee. Strong Nepali black tea, no milk. Today she needed clarity, not comfort. On the table lay her appeal. The papers she had rewritten 3 times. A handwritten copy, a typed one, and a small photo of her and her daughter, faint, grainy, but clear enough to show a child's smile, untouched by the uncertainty of her mother's life. Samira sat down, resting her hand on the stamped envelope. For a long moment she didn't move. No hope, no blind faith, but no surrender either. She rewrote the final line, just one sentence. I do not ask for mercy. I only ask to be allowed to live as myself. Then she stood, put on her coat, wrapped her scarf. Caleb was clearing the walkway when he saw her step outside, the envelope in her hand. He didn't ask, but his eyes softened, not with surprise, but with understanding. He knew what day it was, even if it wasn't one anyone would mark on a calendar. Samira didn't speak. She just nodded once and began to walk, her steps leaving deliberate prints across the fresh snow. At the post office, she stood in line among a handful of locals, old and young, gloved and bundled, each with their own quiet story. No one knew she was sending away a piece of her fate. When her turn came, she handed the envelope to the clerk and spoke softly.
Please send it today.
The clerk nodded, affixed the postage, and stamped the corner. USPS, first class, date received, March 2nd, 2025. Samira left without looking back. There was no music, no cinematic glow. But inside her, something shifted. Not hope, exactly, but a kind of steadiness. She had done what she could. The rest was no longer hers to carry. Back at the station, Caleb handed her a cup of tea. He didn't ask anything, but when he set it down, he said quietly,
Whatever happens, you're still the one who gets to decide who you are.
Samira nodded. She didn't smile, but her eyes, finally, had softened. That noon, the fire station kitchen was filled with the scent of chicken curry. Samira stood by the pot, wooden spoon in hand, tasting the broth. On the counter beside her were trays of momo she had steamed earlier that morning. It was Ellie's idea to bring a few Nepali dishes to the upcoming spring market. "Just a few trays," Ellie had said, "but people should know who you are, not just that you're the best cook and cleaner in this whole station." Samira agreed, not to impress anyone, but to remind herself that she still had something to offer, something that was hers alone. Caleb walked in, catching the swirl of spices in the air. He didn't ask what she was cooking. He just picked up a small piece of bread, tasted it, and nodded.
You might want to label this one as not spicy. Otherwise, Mrs. Mary next door will think you're trying to burn her tongue off.
Then you can help me write the labels?
I'm good at choosing simple words.
Samira laughed, handing him a blank sheet of paper and a pen. Caleb wrote slowly, his handwriting firm but unhurried. Chicken curry, mild spice. Steamed dumplings, vegetable. Nepali-style rice pudding, sweet. When Samira bent down to adjust the stove flame, he stood, slipping his phone from his pocket, and walked outside without a word. He headed toward the bench near the edge of the woods, the one where he usually sat alone in the early mornings. But this time, he wasn't there for tea. He was there to make a call. The screen lit up. His son's name, David, still in his contacts, still in the same spot it had been for more than 10 years. Caleb sat down. His hand trembled slightly as he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 4 times, then a click. Hello?
It's your dad.
Silence. No click, no greeting, just air between them.
I'm not calling to bother you. It's sunny today in Maine. The snow's melting slow, but it's melting.
A breath on the other end. Hard to tell if it was long or short, anger or restraint.
I know it's been a long time, and I'm not good at saying things when I should. But if you ever have the time, and you'd want to, I'm still here.
I'm in Denver, working with wood. Small shop, but it's steady.
That's good.
Next month I've got a delivery heading through New Hampshire. I could swing up to Maine, if you'd like to meet.
I'd like that.
All right, then. See you. The line went dead. No, I love you. No, I forgive you. But Caleb hadn't been looking for those words. He looked toward the far end of the yard, where a pale stripe of sunlight rested on the thinning snow. For the first time in 12 years, he knew the door hadn't closed all the way. By the end of March, the mornings were still cold, but sunlight had begun to stitch through the grey clouds, thin threads of gold cutting across the sky like light sewn into fabric. In the small square before the wooden church, stalls were being set up, checkered tablecloths over wooden tables, strings of little flags fluttering, the smell of baked bread mingling with the damp scent of thawing earth. The town's spring market was less an event than a ritual, a way of saying we're still here. Not crowded, only a few dozen people, but everyone brought something they'd made, grown, or baked with their own hands. Samira carried 3 trays, chicken curry, vegetarian momo, and sweet rice pudding. She set them neatly on a wooden table beside Ellie's booth and spread a plain white cloth. Beside each tray was a small card. Chicken curry, mild spice, vegetable dumplings, steamed, not fried, sweet rice pudding, Nepali style. The handwriting was careful and even, the corners of the cards rounded cleanly. Caleb had written each label by hand, then taped them neatly with clear tape. When Samira worried she didn't know how to make it look right, he'd said simply, "Just be yourself. People will see it." She stood behind her table, didn't call out, didn't speak much, but she stood straight, in a grey sweater, a deep red scarf, her hair tied back. She didn't look like someone from this place anymore, but she no longer looked like a stranger either. The first visitor was a girl about 8 years old. She peeked over the table, eyes wide.
What's this? Steamed dumplings. In my country, we call them momo.
Her mother hesitated, then smiled.
2, please.
Samira used tongs, placed them into a paper box, and handed it over with both hands. The woman smiled again. Nothing dramatic, but softer now. Then came the honey seller, the elderly couple from across the road, and finally Jordan, bundled in a thick coat, walking with his girlfriend. He took a bite of curry, winced at the spice, but nodded approvingly.
You gotta make this again. It's seriously good.
Caleb stood off in the distance near the church's apple pie stall. He didn't approach, but his gaze found her table. Steady, not watchful, just quietly present. Ellie stopped by at noon, taking a box of dumplings and whispering with a grin.
You did better than most people born here.
Samira didn't reply, but a small curve lifted her lips, like a young sprout pushing through melting snow, fragile yet undeniable proof of life. The market wound down by afternoon. People packed up their tables, the last patches of snow turning to slush beneath their boots. Samira gathered her leftovers, rinsed the trays, folded the cloth. No one applauded. No one whispered. But as she turned to leave, an old woman passing by touched her hand.
That's rice pudding. It reminded me of my husband. He served once in Nepal. Thank you, dear.
Samira watched her go, her hand resting lightly against her chest as if to hold on to something small and invisible that had just brushed past her heart. She didn't know if her appeal would be accepted. She didn't know when she'd see her daughter again. But today, she had stood in the daylight among people without hiding, and that, for now, was enough. The snow was almost gone. At dawn, thin sheets of ice still clung to the edges of the steps, clear and fragile, like the last layer of winter's skin, refusing to leave. But sunlight had returned, a pale, golden kind of light, the first after a long, colourless season, slanting through the kitchen window and spilling into the heart of the fire station. Samira had arrived before sunrise. She brewed tea, not the strong black tea she usually made, but mint, light, fragrant, as if meant to calm something trembling quietly inside her. On the kitchen table, beside the tea tray, lay a pale yellow envelope. In the corner, bold black letters read, USCIS, Notice of Decision. At the bottom, a red circular stamp, blurred slightly, as though by the grip of someone who had held it too tightly. Caleb came in from the back lot, wearing his wool hat, hands deep in his coat pockets. He stopped at the doorway, looking in. The sunlight draped over his shoulders like a soft shawl. In that light, he didn't look like the stern, steady man he always seemed to be. Just a father, a survivor, and maybe someone who had learned how to simply be there. He sat down without a word. Samira poured tea, setting a cup in front of him. The envelope rested nearby, not hidden, not displayed. She took her seat across from him, fingers laced loosely in her lap. For a while, the only sound was the faint crack of the teapot cooling.
You read it?
I did.
Silence.
The result?
I'm allowed to stay.
Caleb didn't nod, didn't smile, but his shoulders eased slightly. Not from exhaustion, but from the weight of something he'd been carrying far too long.
Will anyone come with you?
No, I want to do it myself, step by step.
Caleb took a sip of tea, then set the cup down, studying his hands.
I don't really know what to say. But if you're staying, not for me, not for anyone, then I think that's the right reason.
I'm staying because I chose to. No longer the one chosen, no longer the one running.
Sunlight spilled across the table. Steam rose from the tea, soft as morning fog.
Do you need anything?
Just tea and a quiet kitchen.
She stood to fetch some pastries. Caleb watched her move, gently, deliberately, without the guardedness she once carried. There was no trace of defense in her now. No expectation, just presence. Full, calm, and steady enough to need no words. When she set the plate down, Caleb said nothing. He only slid his cup slightly toward the center, a small, wordless invitation, and Samira understood. She refilled his cup, then her own. They sat there, not facing each other fully, not touching, not making promises. But this time, silence wasn't emptiness. It was proof that some people, after everything, still choose to stay. Not out of need, but out of will. Not from fear, but because they've stopped running. Thank you for listening to the story. If you have any thoughts, Feel free to share them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Once again, I'm really happy to have you here. Don't forget to subscribe so we can keep sharing more stories about life together. Take care and see you next time.